Hi, I'm Temba, and I'm here to give you what we call Kidlines at Little News Ears. That is, headlines for kids. And yes, I am from Zeusania. In other words, Earth far into the future. That's why I've got this trunk. But trust me, I'm all about teaching kids on Earth about Black community news. Our first Kidline is, in September, a statue of Robert E. Lee was removed in Richmond, Virginia. Who was Robert E. Lee? You probably know that there was a civil war in America from 1861 to 1865. It was a war between the North and the South. One of the reasons for the war was slavery. Slavery meant that Black people were held against their will and not paid for their work. The South wanted slavery to continue in the U.S. The North believed that slavery should be abolished, which means that it should end immediately. Robert E. Lee was the general for the Confederate Army, that is, the Army of the South. Today, people who don't want to take the statue down feel that statues like this aren't about racism, but about commemorating history. The statue was taken down because many people believe that statues of Confederate figures like Robert E. Lee celebrate racism, which goes against democracy, our form of government. What do you think? Black Americans can now trace their family trees with the Freedmen's Bureau records. It is often difficult for African Americans to learn about their family histories because in many cases their ancestors were enslaved and without an official record. Now, Ancestry.com is allowing free access to the Freedmen's Bureau, a project from 1865 that helped formerly enslaved African Americans and poor white people receive food, education, and housing after the Civil War. This will allow many African Americans in 2021 to learn more about their ancestors. Our third Kidline is, a Black principal in Texas is forced to resign over critical race theory. Remember in October when we explained what critical race theory, or CRT, is? CRT is taught at the university level, meaning people study it in college. It teaches that systemic racism has been and is still a factor that exists and keeps African Americans and other people of color from having the same opportunities as white people. In the summer of 2020, after the protests related to the death of George Floyd, Dr. James Whitfield, a popular high school principal at Colleyville High School in Colleyville, Texas, wrote a letter that said, "Education is the key to stomping out ignorance, hate, and systemic racism." And because he wrote this letter, people started accusing him of pushing CRT in his school. As of this recording, there is no evidence that Dr. Whitfield implemented CRT in any way at his high school, and he also denied doing so. Still, he lost his job. Our fourth Kidline, the Metropolitan Opera House in New York City presents an opera by a Black composer. In September, for the first time in history, the Met staged a work by a Black composer, Terence Blanchard's Fire Shut Up in My Bones. The New York Times calls this opera fresh and effective. Let's hear a little bit from it.
I once was a boy of peculiar grace, a dangerous existence for a man of my race.
What do you think? Our fifth Kidline is, Fisk University's Jubilee Singers celebrate 150 years of singing. The Fisk Jubilee Singers have been singing African American spirituals for over 150 years. As important as this is, maybe it's more important to say that the Fisk Jubilee Singers just won a Grammy and helped bring in tens of thousands of dollars to Fisk University, an HBCU that, like other private HBCUs, has received less and less funding from the federal government over the past 15 years. And now our quiz of the month. Let's see how much you remember from June. What is an HBCU? A. Heatherton, Baltimore, Cockeysville University. B. Historically Black College and University. C. Harvard, Boston, Cornell University. The answer is B. Historically Black College University. Thanks for listening to Temba's Kidlines. There's lots more news for kids streaming at LNE.news.com. We're also on YouTube and major podcasting platforms. May your sweetness shine and your colors glow. Sources for today's episode come from NBC BLK, the New York Times, the Texas Tribune, Mental Floss, and NPR. Sources for today's episode come from NBC BLK, the New York Times, the Texas Tribune, Mental Floss, and NPR.